In today's episode, I speak to Charlene Norman about what is leadership now and how leaders can make a significant difference. We talk about what stops teams from changing and why the top job suddenly becomes undesirable. Working for a company that strips your soul just isn't worth working for. In today's episode, we ponder on how it feels when the team doesn't need you anymore. And we also consider the thorny question of how you can teach leadership now and why blind followership is undesirable. Tune in for the rest of our conversation. Before we begin our conversation, here is a quick shout out to the pathologically curious. Check out the Maverick Paradox magazine. It's a digital magazine written by Mavericks for business owners and professionals. You can find the magazine at themaverickparadox.com. The magazine's aim is to provoke maverick leadership everywhere. Welcome to the Maverick Paradox podcast, where we explore what it is to be a maverick and discover effective modes of leadership. I am Judith Germain, and my mission is to propel the maverick mindset into a world where character and integrity will ultimately have a higher premium than personality and bureaucracy. So thank you for joining me on this journey. If you would like to continue with me, then please subscribe to my podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, or one of the other popular podcast platforms. And today, our guest is Charlene Norman. Hi, Charlene.
Hey, how are you, darling?
I'm doing all right, thanks. And you?
Well, there's a bit of rain over here. I'm in Canada, and apparently we're supposed to have 2 inches of rain. So I'm hoping the connection will not go down.
Well, let's hope not. Let's hope not. Okay, before we get into our conversation, tell us about you.
Me. I'm in the business of helping business owners and senior leaders make more impact in their worlds. And a lot of people say to me, well, what on earth does that mean? And I say, well, I can help you in 2 ways. I can help you find, I can help you take your ordinary employees and help them make extraordinary results. Most people look at me like I have, and I say, well, listen, I have led companies from 10 million to $750 million. I understand all the functions. I'm certainly not an expert on anything, but I understand the functions. And I believe that business is personal. Personal means people, not data, not tech. I mean, they're lovely, but people.
Yeah.
So that's often an eye-opener for a lot of companies and a lot of senior leaders, because we were all trained once upon a time that we could be the best. We were all trained that it would be important if we beat the other person. And I think the world is changing, and my philosophy has always been, turn me upside down and make it we, and you can have the best results you ever wanted.
I have never heard it done that way. I've also heard there's no I in team or something like that. I quite like that. That's really cool. Thanks for that. That makes a lot of sense. When you talk about teams, what stops teams from changing?
Well, based on more than 25 years of leading teams, I'm going to say it depends on the person at the top. In my experience, everyone wants to follow a really solid leader. And a solid leader, in my mind, is not someone who knows everything. It's not someone who's an expert on anything. It's someone who has the back of their team. And what that means is they don't make decisions without taking into account what the impact is going to be on the bodies that they have following them. I've noticed lots of leaders They're more focused on what the corporate rules and objectives are. And they'll do anything at the cost of the people that they have on their team. That and human beings are really good readers of other human beings. And when you come across with, I'm doing it for the company, not for you, people can read into that and they realize that it doesn't really matter. They don't matter and you don't have their back. But what I've found is if you switch it and you say, okay, here's what our objectives are. I know this is what you want. Tell me what else you want. You'll never get 100%, but let's get you at least to 50%. All of a sudden, I find that the desire not to change disappears. The desire to follow because there's something in it for them, it shoots right through the roof. Am I making sense?
It is. You're making sense. I was just wondering whether does that mean that everybody is self-interested and no one is doing things for other people? They're only doing it for themselves?
I wouldn't say I wouldn't say 100%, but I will say yes. In some way or another, everyone is interested in themselves, one way or the other. And some of us, as we get older, we realize that we're not as important and it's more important to give back and make a difference. Whereas some people never get to that point. But I think, and so when you get to the point that you want to give back, yes, you're still self-interested, but you're more concerned about other people, as opposed to, I want to get to be the vice president or president or the big person, or I want to make that decision, or I want to run that project, or I want to bring this idea to the world because it's the best thing and I'm the only person who can do it. Everyone is self-motivated, yes, to some degree or another.
Yes, and I think often when you're climbing that ladder, when you first start, that top job looks really great. But as you start to climb that ladder, you realise just what you have to give up for that top job, and it's not quite so attractive.
You know, that's a really, really profound statement, Judith. I remember when I was 30, and I was the most senior woman in a $1.5 billion corporation.
Wow.
And I was strutting around like that's pretty cool. And then and the day that I lost all my coolness was the day that I had to sign a paper. Sitting around a boardroom, we had to let 1,500 people go. In those days, re-engineering was the key.
Yeah.
And the men at the boardroom table, nobody was happy about signing the death wish for these 1,500 people who had done nothing wrong. It wasn't their fault. It was actual incompetence on the terms of the leaders at the top. But I remember the gentleman all looked at me and said, well, just make sure that our benefit, our defined benefit is secure, and make sure that my golf membership was paid. And I remember thinking, wait a minute, that's not what business is about. If this is what it means for me to sit at the top of an organization, I want out. So I came home to my husband and I said, I think I'm going to quit. And I'm going to ask my boss, who loved me. I think it was number 2 financial person or whatever. Anyways, I was lucky I got a package. And it was a good package. And it was that point where I said, I am in charge of my life. I don't need to be associated with companies that are just going to strip my soul. And I'm not sure that was maybe the best idea or the smartest idea at that point. But from there on, anything that I did was always about what's good for my soul and what's good for all the folks that I'm impacting. And I went on to I had good success with that.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting because Mavericks make that decision very quickly and very easily. I don't feel that this person's a good person to follow. I need to go out. It's a decision.
Yes.
And even if there is no plan, they'll either get a plan or just go, I'll be fine. I'm just leaving. But what I do notice now with the late millennials and Generation Z is that they reach that point quite quickly too. I don't trust you. I need to move out. And I think with all these individuals in lockdown and working remotely now, is that they're beginning to notice the organisations that do treat them badly, because it's no longer acceptable. So I suppose if you're all in the office and you're treated badly, and everyone's treated badly, the majority of people just whinge about it amongst themselves. But then if you're now at home on your own and your boss is still acting the same way, you feel it more, don't you? And then I think when we do get back to working in a different way than we are now, I think people will start to move organisations because they won't want to be the company that didn't pay them or they micromanaged them or whatever.
I think you're absolutely right. I'm actually very excited about the crisis that the world is undergoing right now. Not that I'm excited about the deaths, not that I'm excited about the pandemic. What I'm excited about is when this is over, which won't be that long, that there's not that much time when it's going to be over and we're all back to work. All the rules have to change. The rules will change. And I'm excited for the folks that are going to stand up and say, I'm not taking it anymore. This is the new rule, and this is how we're going to work. It started a year or two ago, and forgive me, my focus has been North America, but I know Europeans are smarter than North Americans, and I think the Europeans started it sooner. There were a bunch of business people in North America that got up and said, hey, wait a minute, our responsibility is to all. It's to the entire community. It's to all stakeholders. It's not just to the shareholders. And I was happy that they started this movement, but I was not happy that they weren't making huge strides in their company. In other words, women and visible minorities and all that, they still hold a really teeny tiny spot in the leadership. And I know that the Europeans are a lot farther along. Now, with everything that people have been through, they have the opportunity and the desire and the gumption to stand up and say, we're not going to take it anymore. This is not what I want to do. It's not good for my soul. And here's how we're going to move forward. And your definition of Mavericks fits perfectly for what we're going to go. I really don't see the old white man command and control methodologies. They can't survive.
No, it's going to be very difficult for organisations to say to people, you cannot work from home 2 days a week. It's not possible when you're going to have people working from home for months. Because I think we'll be working from home for quite some time yet. And I think it'll be interesting because you will not be able to go back and say we can't run a business with people working from home because it's not true. So that's quite interesting.
I agree with you. One of the things that I've noticed, the smarter companies are not using Zoom for all their communications. The smarter companies are using the integrated platforms, for example, like Microsoft Office 365 or whatever. Why? Because the security is better, because the functions that are within that system itself, the whole 365, they were designed for remote working. I noticed that less mature companies, and mature, you can use any definition you want, less mature companies are saying, oh, well, we'll just use Zoom. One, we'll just use the free version or the cheapest version, and maybe we'll use one piece of software, Slack, to do instant messaging or something. That is not, in my opinion, remote working. That is not team collaboration. That's just doing extra things with a couple more pieces of technology. But the smarter companies are using integrated platforms with sharing documents, sharing files, video conferencing quickly or lengthy, doing their meetings in a different fashion, as in, instead of, have you finished that yet? It's, what's getting in the way of you completing that? Or when can we expect this? Or these are the outcomes that we're looking for, the results that we're looking for. And let's just figure out when we can get them done, as opposed to the old way, which is, I need that yesterday. Why aren't you finished yet? You're letting me down. That's got to stop.
Yeah, I think team cohesion is more important now than ever has been before. And I know that working with some of my clients has gone into sort of ensuring that the team stays cohesive and stays on track, because those soft skills that you would employ when you're physically in the room with somebody isn't being employed whilst everybody is remote. And the managers are not yet used to working remotely, so they're not considering, what does that mean for an employee to do this? It's almost like assumed that, right, okay, we've got the work, we've sent the work out, they know what to do, they can just work from home now. And the working from home now is not the same from working from home prior to the pandemic, because often you had a different setup. You might not have had everybody at home with you. It would have been a quiet environment and such like. So it's quite different.
And you're right, Judith. And the thing that I am looking at, and I don't have a firm opinion yet. None of us learned, when we went to school, none of us learned how to be a decent leader. I'm not talking a manager, because people don't need to be managed. Projects are managed. People are led. There was no course about leadership or getting the best out of people. I don't. And there, just recently, I heard that, I'm not sure whether it was Harvard or Wharton, developed a program to start. And my experience, not that it means a lot, my experience is, to be a damn good leader, you need to have 10 years of mistakes behind you before you actually start to figure out, oh, I should be doing it this way, I should be doing it that way. And I know the first time that I'm getting to my point, I know the first time I was made a manager, no one ever told me my role was not to do things. My role was to encourage other people and bring the best out of the other people. So when I sit back today and I think about the way the world is going to be, I'm actually trying to figure out where the best way to teach the excellent managers and decent leaders of today, what is the best way to teach them some of those skills? It's not in university. It's not in school. I don't think it's in books. I'm worried about a lot of the companies that think leadership is just having a plan and working a plan. It's not. It's about people, and and it's not a Tony Robbins thing either. And I'm struggling. I'm struggling to figure out what's the best way to get those skills into this new way of doing business? I don't have any ideas. What do you think?
Well, I think it's interesting. For me, maverick leadership is all about who you are as an individual and what you do. And I think the most important thing is that the individual needs to want to learn. So I remember years ago, before I was even thinking about my first proper job when I was 17, I was definitely an immature maverick in a way. So I remember my boss telling me, he was a maverick as well, saying to me, "I'm never going to promote you, Jude." And I was horrified. And I said, "What do you mean? I'm the best person you've got?" Wasn't very tactful at that age. And he said, "You are, but you upset people. And then I have to deal with them when they're crying and they're upset." And I said, "Yeah, but I'm really popular, and after a couple of days they calm down and it's all right. And look, get on with everybody." And he said, "That's true, but in that 2 days, I have to deal with it, and quite frankly, I'm fed up with it." So I was like, oh. But because I really trusted and respected this man, he was like, he's definitely my template of, one of about 4 or 5 good bosses. I thought, gosh, what do I need to do so that I can still do what I want to do, but do it in a way that doesn't upset people? So rather than going, I need to learn how to lead and go and find leadership books, I thought, what are the key criteria? So I thought, well, I need to understand how people communicate with each other. And it's like reading a book called I'm Okay, You're Okay, Transactional Analysis. I bought books on body language. Read books on persuasion and influence. I did all those kind of component parts and experimented. Let me let me try this out with my friends. Let me try this out with my work. And then eventually ended up starting looking at leadership books. But they weren't my first thing. My first thing was working out what are the components and what are the things that I struggle with. And I went from there, and it wasn't. And then over time, very quickly, within months, I ended up being responsible for managing. I ended up having real proper responsibility at an extremely young age. But it's because I wanted to improve and I wanted to understand how I could be more effective. But that came from me wanting to do that. And I think in terms of leading and teaching people to lead comes first from that individual needing a compelling reason to learn. Now that compelling reason might be, I'm going to get sacked if I can't do this properly. Or it might be, I want to be promoted, or I just want to improve as an individual. But I think what's missing from a lot of leadership programs and mentoring and coaching is this understanding that leadership isn't something that you do to people. It's something you do with people. And that means, because when I do leadership training, for example, I'll say, if you're somebody who isn't trusted and trustworthy, you cannot engender trust with people. Why on earth would anybody do anything that you say? Why would they bother? And people seem horrified. And it's like, it's leadership. I'm not going to teach you a set of skills for you to try to manipulate people. Maverick leadership is about influencing, not manipulation.
You're absolutely right.
Yeah, so therefore, and I also say, is like, if you have decided to become a maverick leader, that is something you do and something who you are, which means you don't come to work and put on your leadership coat. You lead when you're at home, you lead as a parent, as a brother, sister, adult, whatever. You are constantly leading. You don't suddenly become a maverick leader when you walk into the doors. You are a maverick leader. It's an identity as well as a methodology of what you're doing. And I think as soon as you start to blend and get yourself, all the component parts of yourself integrated, then you become a better person. And you become a better leader of yourself and others. It doesn't become something you think, I must do this. You just do it.
You just do it.
You've learned the component parts, but you don't sit and think, I need. So I think like sometimes when, say, so what I've noticed, one of the reasons why I wrote my book, The Maverick Paradox, The Secret Power Behind Successful Leaders, was that in the past, leadership theories only worked in the time period they were setting. And then as the time period moved on, they stopped working. And often it's because they were all about manipulation of the environment, as opposed to this marriage between you, the individual leading, and the things that you do as a leader that enables people to want to follow you and emulate you. Because that's the best leading, isn't it? People that turn around and go, I had such a wonderful compliment from a client, and I'd done some leadership training, and I was doing some following up coaching, and I said, how's it getting on? Do you need anything else? And I said, no, because whenever I get stuck, I sit there and I think, what would you do? And then I would do what I think you would do. And I said to him, we had a 3-day training course. Do you think you know what I would do well enough to be able to imagine what I would do? And he said, well, yes, of course. And that was a real shock, thinking we haven't spent that much time together, and it's in the course of other people. But he felt that, and I think it's because Maverick Leadership, you can't strip you out. It's such an integral part of what you're doing that it means that you can lay a pathway for people to emulate what you're doing without actually having to teach all those component parts. What do you think?
I've never heard a story like your personal one, and that is really, really cool. You said a few things that I have done in my life. You talk about how you started. I was more analytical. I was 25. I had 5 people. I was thrown in, made a manager. Okay, now you got 5 people, do it. And anyways, they gave me the best gift. After I trotted into my office at 7:00 at night, and they said, Char, we really like you. But as a manager, woman, you suck. And they, imagine, all these people are, you suck, woman. And
Wow.
And so they listed all the things that I did wrong and that they wanted improved. And I sat there and, I remember my stomach just did horrible flips. And I sat there with a smile on my face, and I had learned at that point to bite my cheek and let them speak. That was all I knew at that point. And I said, okay. And then they gave me the ultimatum. They said, well, if you don't change, we're leaving in 3 months. And I'm going, well, shit, that's not supposed to happen. So I went home. This became a routine over my life. I went home, poured myself a glass of wine, and said, so how are we going to get out of this one, dear? And inside, and you're right, it has to come from you inside. You have to want to do a better job. And I couldn't stand the humility of people walking out on me because I was brilliant. Together, I was going to be the best of the best of the best, and I had to prove it, right? So I put myself on a path, blah, blah, blah. So it worked. And I'm not going to get into what I did, but fast forward 25 years. And I remember it was my last day. I was the grand poobah, and I walked around, and I said goodbye to everybody, and they were all crying on my shoulder. And this was a factory. It was a production facility. And so all these people were very comfortable saying, F this, F that, whatever. And here they are, they're all crying on my shoulder. And I couldn't understand why. And they said, there's no one here that's going to have our back, and you're the best that's ever happened. So, okay, that makes your ego feel good. But how I knew that I had, quote unquote, mastered whatever leadership was the parent company tapped me on the shoulder and said, oh, woman, what is your secret here? You're making way more money in the business than any of our other 20 subsidiaries, and they were all in the US. And why did this little Canadian chick, why could she do all this? And I said, well, I don't know, just come on in and look. So they studied us, and they couldn't figure it out. And I wasn't about to share with them what the reason was. And I said, okay, well, we can't figure it out. So whatever your secret sauce is, we want you to go and teach the other 19 subsidiaries that are losing money how to make so much money. And I got into a discussion with one of the fellows, and I said, well, really, you have to pay attention to your people. Well, we don't have time for that. I said, well, that's what your job is. You have to pay attention to your people. And you set goals and you ask them to buy into it, and you put it in their terms. And then I said, for me, the biggest thing is creativity. I don't know very much. They know way more than I do. So I ask them to give me their best ideas. And then he looked at me, the big senior VP, and he said, well, we don't do that. I said, well, then you'll never make the money that we make. And I didn't realize at the time how true it was. Or how true I was, that for me, I had spent so many years tapping into all my people, asking them to come up with their best ideas, and not once did anyone ever let me down. You always get back when you ask, and you always get your best when you develop an environment that they know you've got your back. That does not mean that you can't yell at them. It doesn't mean you can't make mistakes. Does not mean you can't apologize for being an idiot. It means they trust you, you trust them, and it's always stronger in numbers. Lots of companies, they like to say they have a system. We have our way, we do our thing. But that takes out all the creativity. That takes out all the humanness. And as I said earlier, to me, business is personal. Personal means people. And the best leaders, the one thing that they don't talk about is how much time they spend listening and bouncing ideas off their team. That's really, it sounds so simple. It takes a crap ton of time. You get used to it when you're settled in, and it's absolutely outstanding when you see the results of that.
Yeah, and it only takes a lot of time in the early days when you've got to show that they can tell you stuff and you're not going to get angry. They can criticize you and you're not going to get angry. But once all that bedded in, it becomes so much speedier, because you know that if they want to talk to you, it's because they've got a reason for it. What you do is you empower them to become leaders, and that's exactly. So you don't need to do that because they're doing that. I think there's a couple of things I used to say to teams whenever I used to go places would be, don't ever let me walk out the door and go and speak to a director or another manager and you know what I'm saying is wrong. Stop me and say, actually, I don't think this is the right thing, or and then I'll listen, we'll discuss it, and I may still carry on and do it because there might be some bit of information you're not aware of, or I might be like, oh gosh, yeah, that's totally right, let's have a new plan. And I would always be open to feedback, and I would seek it in the sense that you do a review or something and say, right, what do I need to do to be a better boss for you? Or what is it that I must be doing something that's irritating? Like when you first joined, and they'll say nothing. They'll say you're wonderful, and you'll go, yeah, that's great, but I know I'm not. So what is it? And then the first couple of times you get things that aren't important because they're testing you to see whether you're going to be grumpy afterwards or sack them or something. And then when they begin to realise that actually you genuinely want to do that, then they will say, well, actually, when you do this, it's really annoying because of X, Y, and Z. And then you can then discuss it and say, okay, I'll stop doing that, or no, I'm going to continue doing that because it's really important. This is the why. But it makes a huge difference when you can be open and to have your team really looking out for you because they know you're looking out for them.
Yeah, I don't know about you, Judith, but the first time my team said to me, Char, we don't need you. We can handle this all by ourselves. Go away. The first time I heard that, I was devastated because I thought to myself, oh my God, they don't need me. What do I do? And then all of a sudden it kicked in. I had done my job. I had got a team that was totally engaged, totally empowered, totally in love with what they were doing. And then I could go off and think about all the best things that I wanted to do over the next 6 months, 12 months, 3 years. But the first time, honestly, the first time any team said to me, Charlene, we don't need you, it always caused my stomach to roll. I'm not needed. I'm no longer necessary, even though I always said, I'm only here so that I can get myself out of a job so that you guys can get better. Over they don't need me anymore. Oh my God, look at all the free time I can get stuff done. I can help grow. That's a big revelation for a lot of leaders. And the other thing, you mentioned it about being honest, open, and transparent. When you ask me what stops teams from changing, they don't have the full picture. Too many old-fashioned leaders look at, I'm not really going to tell you the whole thing, because either one, I don't know the whole thing. 2, I'm not really sure and I don't want to look like a jerk. Or 3, you don't need to know, I'm the important person. I developed a reputation for over communicating. I would always say, okay guys, here's where we're going. I'm not really sure, but we're going to set out in this direction. And if anyone notices we're kind of going off kilter, bring it to my attention, because you all know I don't like surprises. But we're gonna try it anyway. And even though it may not be 100%, we're going to go and we're going to see. And I swear, as long as the team has the full picture of why you're doing it, what the impact is to them, what they do or do not get out of it, as long as they know up front going in, to the best of your ability, what the whole picture is, they'll follow you to the ends of the earth. Nothing will stop them. They will go with you.
Yeah, and I think that's totally right. I think the big difference is they will follow you to the ends of the earth, but they're not following you blindly. And I think that's the big difference between socialized mavericks and extreme mavericks. Because extreme mavericks wants the loyalty where someone will be a lemming and just jump off the cliff because you've said. Whereas a socialized maverick will empower people and engender people to follow them to the earth, but they will still be eyes open. Do you know what I mean? So just before they get to the end, they'll be like, you know what? Something new happened, and I think we probably shouldn't go this way. And they're comfortable because the leader doesn't see it as a challenge to the authority. They see it as a challenge to the problem. So therefore, it's not personal. So if somebody says, yeah, that's a great idea, but there's new evidence now, I think we should be doing something else. You're not upset. You're like, wow, you caught that before I did. Let's explore that. And then you might be, no, we're still carrying on this way, or gosh, that was a great save. This is no longer relevant. Let's do it this way. So, I mean, it allows, I guess, the speed of trust to happen really fast. And if you have a relationship of trust, then there is less criticism and less defensiveness, so things move faster.
Exactly. And I don't know about you, but one of the questions I get is, okay, how do you establish that trust? How do you build that trust up fast? And fast is a relative word, but if I can, I'll share a couple of things that have always worked for me. If someone ever comes into my office or wants my full attention, I take my glasses off, fold my hands, and I stay that way until they leave. They know I am listening to them. I don't answer the phone. I do nothing. They're there right in front of me. The other thing is, if I ever, I never spoke differently to any one person. I always spoke. Okay, people have different ways of communicating, but I never told one story to one and a completely different story to another. If we were in crappy times, I believed it was important that I be with my team. So if if we had to take a pay cut, I took the pay cut. If there was some horrible medicine, we all took it, because in my opinion, people are the equity inside of a business. They're not resources. They're not human resources. They're not your people that do things. They are your equity. So you have a vested interest in them. They have a vested interest in you. So it made no sense to me that why should I get special treatment because I'm the grand poobah? I should be treated just like them. When people realize that you don't see yourself better than you see yourselves exactly as them, or you treat them with respect, even if it's the gatekeeper in Guatemala, everyone is deserving of respect one way or the other. All of a sudden, that trust level really goes high. The other thing that I always found was occasional, once or twice a month, meetings with everybody, either one-on-one or in a group, where you're allowed to ask questions, and I answer, and that was what do other people make. Other than that, you want to know how much money we're making, you want to know where we're making it, you want to know what customers we need to be nice to, what suppliers we have. It's an open book, and people, I have found, respect that level of honesty and say, the person, that is a trustworthy person, so they'll follow you to the ends of the world.
Yeah, I agree. I think there needs to be consistency, because one of the ways that people trust is that they can imagine your response to something. So
Yes.
If something's gone wrong, they can imagine what you will do. And if their imaginings means that you will lose your temper and shout and look for someone to blame, then you're not going to find out it's gone wrong until it's really bad. But if they can imagine you're like, right, okay, let's sort this out, then they will trust you. Because I was very much kind of what have you learned from kind of individual. And I was always going to say, I don't mind if you make loads of mistakes, but if you make the same mistake twice, I'm upset because you're not learning, and we need to make sure you're learning. So if you're going to make another mistake, make a different one, but don't make the same one, because you're not paying attention. And it gets to it's one of those things, isn't it? It's like a few years ago it was all about the learning organisation. That was the fad, wasn't it? How do you make an organisation a learning one? But the reason why it didn't stick for a lot of people is because it was a fad of that time.
Exactly.
And then it moved on. Whereas good socialised managers, good leaders go, yeah, that's a really good concept. I should be asking, what we learned from this and before, and I will just now fold that into my style of management. I'll take that, fold it in, and now that's something I do. So it's no longer a fad, and you skip through a few years, and then people will say, gosh, your style of leadership is so different. It's because you take what's good and you continue, that becomes your new normal. This is what you do now. Rather than going, oh, that's so 1990.
You're absolutely right. And one of the things that I should never admit this in public, but I will. I'm basically a lazy person. I have a short attention span. If I've done it 5 times, I don't want to do it anymore. I want to go off and do something else. One day, I was really frustrated. I didn't want to go through a 2-inch stack of resumes and look for the next best, whatever it was. And I sat there and I thought, how can I get out of this? Because I hate this. Nobody likes hiring. And then I thought, I know what I can do. I can involve my team. So I went to my team and I said, so who wants to learn? Here's how you position it. Who wants to learn how to hire better, or who wants to be part of a hiring process so that we get the right people we want to get? And everybody looked at me like I was a little crazy. And I said, so I have this wild idea. Instead of me finding it, how about we set up a tag team of the person's colleagues that they'll be working on? That means you have say into what happened. Honestly, I just wanted to get the work off my desk. It wasn't really about involving anybody, but I thought if I got them involved, I knew I had a better chance of getting a good result. Well, the result was so good. I learned I was really crappy at hiring people, and my team together brought in the most amazing people that stayed forever. And the turnover went from annually 10% down to 1%. It sure as hell wasn't because I did it. It certainly wasn't because I was brilliant. I just said, we try something different, and I let them experiment with it. To me, I'm about results. I couldn't do it myself, but with my team, and they did it. I don't care how we get the end result, as long as everyone gets there in a happy way, in a contented way, in a way that helps them and also helps what our objectives are. I'm happy. I don't need the credit.
Yeah, I think what makes a good Maverick leader is they don't have any ego. There's no ego. They don't need ego. They know they're good. I already know I'm a good leader. I don't need to know. I know I'm efficient. I know I can do all this stuff. But what I'd rather make sure is there's other people around me that can also do this stuff. And then it'd be much more fun. I've always thought, if the work isn't fun, I don't know why we're doing it. If there's no change in it, what's the point? So I've always make sure there's stretch in everything that people are doing. And if there are people, there are always going to be mundane tasks. There always will be. But my view would be, what I would say to somebody is, yeah, this bit is really important because X, Y, and Z. I recognise that it's boring, but it needs to be done. So I say you're doing some data or admin input or something. So, but however, if you can get that efficient, and let's make this process so lean, there's no fat in it, so you have more time, then we'll find something fun to fill in that time. And I think that makes, so you ended up with something, and it was genuine. It wasn't like I just wanted an efficient department. It was a genuine thing. I want you to come to work and enjoy it. There's some parts of the job that will be boring, but we'll get that done lean and efficiently so it becomes just easy to do. Don't make this your whole job. Make this a period of time, and then any space that we've got free, we will fill that in with either something for the next job you're going to have or something that you really want to learn how to do, and then work becomes fun. There are very few jobs where all of the job is boring and it takes up all of your time. But what happens is people have a boring job, but they are not inspired to find something interesting to do. So they make the boring job their job. When really,
that's exactly it.
It might only take, rather than taking 4 weeks to do something, it might only take a week or half a week. And then you've got 3 weeks to do something really cool. But when people don't think that way, they think, oh, my job's so boring. And they don't learn anything new or interesting.
You're absolutely correct. And the one thing that I find, you started this conversation by talking about the younger generations. Once upon a time, and I'm going to get to my point. Once upon a time, I was young, and I had the most amazing boss, and I was really frustrated because I didn't think the work was right. I didn't think that I was being recognized properly. I was just really, really, really frustrated. I think I was about 27, 28. And the boss, who I'm still friends with many, many decades later, he said to me, Char, you got to realize something. You're pretty smart. However, you need 20 years of solid experience before people are going to pay attention to you. So I, of course, blew up and I said, well, that's too long, blah, 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 blah. And he said, no, everyone needs 20 years of experience. And your first 20 years are when you can experiment and you can get step out of the line. You can take on all kinds of stuff. You have the energy. And your objective in your first 20 years of working is to learn everything you can. Because after 20 years, it's super easy. And when I was 28, he said, you have 10 more years and don't worry. It's going to be super easy. Well, By the time I was 40, everything was easy. It was a piece of cake. Now, does that mean that I didn't have hard things? I did have hard things, but it was easy for me to find the solutions because I had a good grounding. So I often say to the younger people of today, why are you so freaked out? Why are you so panicked? This is the time to get lots of experience, take on all kinds of different stuff, stand up and be noticed, and worry about helping others, because that strengthens you so that by the time you're 35 or 40, everything is easy and you are sitting at the top of your kingdom.
That makes a lot of sense. I had something very similar. When I was 17, I worked for a very traditional insurance company way back before you would have people phoning up for quotes online, you know, like you do now. It was much more traditional, agents and stuff. And I was hired as an admin person. And I remember accepting the job because I could see that the company had lots, it was a massive global company, you know, so good prospects. But I thought to myself, you know, if I'm doing this job after 6 months, I'll just have to go somewhere else, because I had no expectations of doing the admin. Anyway, so I looked at the job and then I discovered that there was a routine cycle to do the job. But if you could do that cycle really, 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 really well in a week, and the previous person used to do it, used to take a whole month to do it. So she had a very easy life because she didn't. But when I looked at it, I looked at all the dependencies, talked to people, and I thought, actually, this only it has to take place in a week at a certain, I can't remember what week it was, but in this cycle. So I learned the job and did it in the week. So that gave me 3 weeks of nothing to do. And I was such a pain. I would go around the other underwriters. What are you doing? How do you do that? Can I have a go? And then after the first couple of weeks of them just giving me filing and thing, they were like, I'll be like, done that. Well, now I was just a pain. I was 17 and in the end they're like, okay, grab a seat. And then they started to teach me to underwrite, and to be a commercial underwriter in those days, you're talking about years and years of experience. And I got pretty good at it because I was just like, what's next? What's next? I don't look at it. And within within 3 months, I started underwriting and doing my job. And then by the time 6 months had passed, they decided that they were not going to hire somebody to do what I was doing, but my job, they were going to split that job into the whole department. So it was fundamentally, you did this cycle thing for a week, and then you had everybody's filing to do and all this kind of stuff. And they said, you know what, it's a waste of resource. So I kept that 1 week's worth of work, and then all the other stuff, like all the filing and all that kind of stuff, then was distributed back into the department. And I ended up becoming an underwriter. And then by the time I'd been there for a year, I was then underwriting at the time where I had a £5 million underwriting limit, which was unheard of because you normally had to be a section manager to have that, and then you'd have to be the best section manager to have that. So I was actually still 17 years old doing, reassurance basically, which is a big deal. It used to be a big deal in the commercial world, with people who were like 20, 30 years older than me, asking for permission to do certain things. And I still had the title of administrator or something, but it was just like, this is so cool. And like my boss, the one that told me he wouldn't promote me, he was a maverick. And he said to me, when you reach the point where you can't do anything anymore, that's when you stop. So you just keep going. And when you can't physically able to do anything else, then we'll look to see whether it's a training need or whether you ought to stop there. So in fact, he took the risk of saying, yeah, I've got my most juniorest person who's been there the least amount of time doing the highest amount of underwriting because she can, and yep. I was so fortunate to have a socialized maverick boss as my first real boss, because that set the tone for how I expected to be treated and what's possible at work. So yeah, that was fun.
That's a really, really impressive story, Judith. And the thing that really hits me is you had excellent boss to begin with,
Yeah,
and then you had excellent bosses throughout when you were not working for yourself. And I too had excellent bosses. And I'm thinking these days, why did we have excellent bosses? Because so many people say, my boss sucks, this sucks, that sucks, whatever. And what I'm wondering, and I don't know, is it possible that mavericks see the world differently, and so they don't see bad bosses, they just see the good that's right there in front of them, as opposed to, say, non-mavericks who only maybe see the negative stuff? I don't know. That's a question.
I think it's about not being so funny enough, I would say that of all the managers I've ever had and all the ones I've subsequently gone on to teach or train or sack or whatever, I think out of all of that, I would say there's only 5 people I would rate out of the thousands of people. I think the difference is I was fortunate to have my first real boss, a good boss, but I think it's that you look at someone who's doing something badly and you don't see it personal. They may be affecting you in a personal way, but you don't see it's because it's you. It sounds really bizarre. So you just think, okay, so when I get in a position like what you're in, I'm not going to do that. So I remember reading a book, again, when I was about 17, 18. I can't remember the title, but the fundamental part of the book was the things you can learn from having a toxic boss. Can't remember what the title was. And one of the things it said is, if you have a boss that's really rubbish at doing this or treats you really bad, look at it as an experiment on what you can learn to do differently. So when I came across bad bosses, and there were a number of bad bosses, I was like, So I became a study of them. Do you know what I mean? Like, yeah, when they do that, that doesn't work. Why doesn't that not work? Let me go and research into that. So, and also I think with mavericks, they see feedback as just data. So you have an opinion and you've told me this, but that's just information for me to analyse, and then I can decide whether I agree with this, in which case then I'll change, or if I don't agree, I'll just ignore it and carry on. So it doesn't become something that affects your self-esteem, because your self-esteem is really high as a maverick. So if you don't like me, that's sad, but okay. Got plenty of other people that like me, so that's okay. Oh, you don't like me and it's affecting me because you're my boss. Now I need to think about, what does that really mean? Do I need to do something differently? Is this something that can be saved? So it doesn't become, it's not something that you go home and cry about because your boss doesn't like you. You go home and you start planning what you're going to do about it.
Yes, and I call that compartmentalization.
Right.
Because I never worried. If there was some idiot who didn't like me, they'd go in a box, and I'd put that box over there. And if there was someone who was always always trying to get me going or whatever, they went in a box. Sure, sometimes it can feel personal, but you train yourself, or you put things in boxes or compartments that, no, that's what this is. Okay, and then you ignore it. You just put it over there and say, yeah, that's what that is. It's got a name to it. And really, at the end of the day, I'm not that important. What's more important is the result that we're trying to get to. If you're going to get in my way, fine, get off the team. If you're either with me or you're not. And I'm not going to waste a lot of time worrying about it.
For me, it wasn't about not getting hurt or getting upset. It's about, or not caring, because it did.
Oh no, caring is very high.
But it didn't. I saw it as a game, in the sense that if I'm going to be upset and stuff, you're not going to see that. I might go home and cry to my other half, but you're not going to. I remember being my first managerial job. So my first managerial job and my first HR job was HR manager for 700 people. So this is another story. Anyway, and I remember the first when I went into that place, the team said to me, "You need to watch out for the boss, because all the other HR managers have all got depression, started drinking, and cried a lot in the office." And I thought, gosh, this is a bit kind of what I expected this. Anyway, so I had a meeting with the manager. He said to me, "Just so that you know, Jude, I always make my HR managers cry. So I don't think you'll last a week before you break down and cry." And I come back going, "What?" And in fact, I must admit, I was really pleased he gave me the warning, because it was like hell on earth for that week. The other managers wouldn't talk to me. They'd answer a question, but they wouldn't. It was kind of a part of their fitting in thing. So for the first week, no one spoke to a new manager at all. They'd answer like work questions, but you'd talk to them and say, "What did you do over the weekend?" And they'd just look at you and there's Karen. You just was in Coventry for the week, and it was, and it was really kind of bad. But because he'd warned me, I was like, "You will not break me. You will not." And I remember literally the week came up, and he called me in the office, and he said, "You're a tough cookie, Jude. I really like you." And he became a really good manager with me. And obviously, being the HR manager, I stopped those processes from continuing, clearly, because they weren't really appropriate. But I remember my team, and I remember the other managers going, "Oh my gosh, you're the first HR manager that hasn't been crying." And the thing is, I probably would have been if he hadn't warned me that was what he was expecting to happen.
Yeah. Wow.
And it was really tough because he was really horrible and mean, but for them in that organisation, it was set up as survival of the fittest, and they wanted the management team to argue with each other and compete against each other and not look out for each other, because they considered it as a great way for keeping the team fired up and keeping the place competitive, and it would be good for customers. And I remember the same manager, because obviously, I don't have to explain why that makes no sense at all. And so I had a campaign of breaking all that down. And I remember the manager saying to me, "Jude, it's really annoying because, the managers all get on with each other now. They're helping each other out. They're recruiting for each other. They're stepping up for each other. And it really annoys me that it's all going great. But I can't argue because the financial results are brilliant." And I was like, "So what's the problem?" He goes, "I don't know. I quite liked it when everybody didn't like each other." And I was like, "But didn't you just say?" And he was like, yeah. He's just like, "But this is not the way we do things for the last 30, 40 years. Everybody hates everybody." It's like, "Yeah, not anymore." But anyway, I think that's probably a good place to stop. Before we do that, though, is there anything that I should have asked you I didn't ask you?
No. In fact, your side of the conversation I've been fascinated with. I'll keep on listening. We're very similar.
Cool. Well, you'll have to come back another time then, and we'll talk about something else.
You're on, darling. You're on.
Brilliant. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Judith. This has been absolutely fascinating.
It has. I really enjoyed it. Thank you once again for tuning into the Maverick Paradox podcast. I hope you have enjoyed listening to my conversation with Charlene as much as I enjoyed having it. If you are pathologically curious and would love to find out more about the Maverick Paradox, then please subscribe to this podcast on one of the popular podcast platforms. Alternatively, you could explore our resources on Mavericks at maverickparadox.com or read the Maverick Paradox magazine. We publish frequently each week. If you subscribe, you will get our monthly newsletter. And let's not forget my book, The Maverick Paradox, The Secret Power Behind Successful Leaders. For those that love a good discussion, you could apply to join our exclusive Facebook group. And finally, if you would like to work with us or just interested in finding out more about the Maverick at work, check out our website maverickparadox.co.uk.